Imagine stepping out into your day, clothed in more than just fabric, wearing a tapestry that tells the world not only who you are, but what you owe, what you're owed, and exactly where you stand in the grand design of your society. Every color, every thread, every intricate pattern around you is more than decoration. It is law, it is order, it is identity, woven together into something you can touch, wear, and live within. This wasn't some distant fantasy. It was the breathtaking reality for the ancient Wari civilization of Peru, a people who turned textiles into one of history's most elegant and effective tools of governance. Long before emojis, street signs, or infographics, the Wari mastered the art of visual language, stitching their entire legal code into the very clothes their people wore. In a sprawling empire stretched across harsh mountains and diverse cultures, they faced a challenge familiar even today: how to communicate clearly across barriers of language, distance, and literacy. Their answer was as simple as it was revolutionary. They spoke through color, they legislated through pattern, they wove meaning into being. In this video, we'll journey back more than 1,000 years to explore how a society without written words built and maintained an empire using textiles that functioned as wearable law. We'll uncover what these stunning artifacts reveal about power, creativity, and human connection, and how the legacy of the Wari still whispers to us through the ages, reminding us that some of the most profound truths aren't written in books, but are etched into the fabric of everyday life. So settle in, open your imagination, and let's begin unraveling one of history's most captivating mysteries, thread by brilliant thread. High in the Andes Mountains, over 1,000 years before the Inca would forge their legendary empire, another power was rising, one that would fundamentally reshape the world of ancient South America. Between 600 and 1000 AD, the Wari Empire emerged from the highlands of what is now Peru, not through sudden conquest alone, but through a breathtakingly original vision of statecraft. They became one of the continent's first great imperial states, a sprawling domain that stretched from the arid coast to the cloud forests, encompassing a mosaic of different peoples, each with their own languages, customs, and gods. Governing such a diverse and geographically fractured realm presented an immense challenge. How do you issue a law that a fisherman on the coast, a potato farmer in the highlands, and a craftsman in a deep valley can all understand when they don't speak the same tongue? The Romans had Latin and vast road systems. The Mesopotamians had cuneiform etched into clay. The Wari had something far more elegant and portable: the loom. They solved the problem of communication not with an alphabet, but with a visual language woven into the very fabric of their society. Textiles became the central nervous system of their empire. As the esteemed archaeologist William Conklin profoundly observed, these fabrics were essentially the books of their time. A government official's tunic wasn't just a uniform, it was a walking legal document, its patterns and colors spelling out tax codes, land rights, and social obligations. A tapestry hanging in an administrative center didn't just decorate the wall, it displayed the rules of trade and the hierarchy of power for all to see. This system allowed the Wari to impose a uniform legal order, collect tribute efficiently, and integrate conquered communities by giving them a new, visual vocabulary for their place within the empire. It was an innovation in governance that was both brilliantly simple and deeply sophisticated, creating a shared identity that transcended the confusion of countless dialects. This visual legal framework didn't just maintain order, it fueled the empire's expansion, providing a stable, understandable structure that could be rolled up and carried to the farthest corners of their territory. In doing so, the Wari laid the essential groundwork, the administrative blueprint that the Inca would later encounter, adapt, and expand upon to build their own vast empire. The Wari proved that authority could be woven and that law could be worn. To create these living legal documents, the Wari relied on a remarkable combination of natural resources and human ingenuity. The backbone of their textile empire was the incredible fiber harvested from native camelids, the sturdy, warm wool of the alpaca, and the exceptionally soft, luxurious fleece of the vicuña, an animal so prized its shearing was likely controlled by the state. In high-altitude workshops, often located in administrative centers, skilled spinners would transform this raw wool into strong, consistent yarn, a process that required immense skill to ensure every thread could withstand the tension of complex weaving without breaking. But the true magic began with color. The Wari dyers were essentially alchemists, mastering the extraction of vivid hues from their environment. They created a rich blood red from the cochineal insect, a tiny parasite that lives on cactus plants. Blues and purples came from the indigo plant, while a whole spectrum of yellows, oranges, and browns were derived from various flowers, roots, and minerals. Each dye batch had to be meticulously prepared and the yarn treated with mordants to fix the colors, ensuring they wouldn't fade quickly and betray the law's meaning. This wasn't just a technical process, it was a sacred and state-controlled operation. The most complex textiles were undoubtedly produced in specialized state workshops, where master weavers, who archaeological evidence suggests were often women of high status, operated under official supervision. These artisans were far more than crafters. They were legal scribes and graphic designers rolled into one. They employed incredibly sophisticated techniques like complementary warp weave and discontinuous warp and weft to create intricate tapestry-like fabrics. A single tunic could contain hundreds of threads per inch, each one deliberately placed to form precise geometric patterns. The complexity was staggering. They didn't have the luxury of written notes or pattern books. The designs and their associated legal meanings were held in the weaver's memories and hands, passed down through generations. This oral and tactile tradition of knowledge was as robust as any written legal code. The resulting textiles were not only visually stunning but also incredibly durable. As textile scholar Mary Frame has emphasized, this combination of portability and resilience made them the perfect medium for empire management. A woven decree could be folded up, slung over a messenger's back, and carried across mountain passes and through deserts to a distant province, arriving intact and its message perfectly clear. It could be worn every day, displayed in a public space, or stored for decades, all without the ink fading or the clay cracking. This was a communication technology perfectly adapted to its time and place. Each finished textile was a testament to this mastery, a seamless fusion of artistic expression and bureaucratic function, engineered to carry the weight of the law across centuries and continents. Now let's dive into the heart of this visual language, the colors themselves. For the Wari, a color was never just a color. It was a symbol, a concept, and a command all rolled into one. Imagine a high-ranking official's tunic dyed a deep, unmistakable crimson. This wasn't merely a fashionable choice. That specific shade of red, painstakingly extracted from the cochineal insect, was a direct representation of sacred authority and noble blood. It signaled to everyone who saw it that the wearer operated with power granted by the gods and the state. Conversely, the earthy browns and greens seen in the garments of farmers were not dull by accident. These colors, derived from local plants and minerals, immediately identified an individual's connection to the land and their role in agricultural production, the very backbone of the empire's economy. This created an instant, non-verbal social hierarchy. A person's place in the complex web of Wari society was communicated before they even spoke a word. But the system went far deeper than simple social stratification. The brilliant blues and purples obtained from the indigo plant likely held profound meanings tied to water rights and spiritual beliefs. In the arid Andean environment, control over water was synonymous with survival and power. A blue pattern on a textile could very well outline regulations for irrigation canal use or signify a family's hereditary access to a sacred spring. Similarly, vibrant yellows and golds sourced from flowers like suncho were almost certainly linked to the sun deity Inti. A garment featuring these solar hues might denote laws governing harvest festivals, ceremonial calendars, or the obligations of communities to provide offerings to the sun temples. Anthropologist Gary Urton's comparison to medieval European heraldry is incredibly apt. Just as a knight's coat of arms used specific colors and animals to declare family lineage, allegiance, and feudal rights, a Wari textile used its palette to declare legal status, civic duties, and spiritual affiliations. This shared symbolic language was the genius of the system. A farmer from the coast and a miner from the highlands, though they might never understand each other's spoken words, could both read the same legal message woven into a magistrate's cloak. This universal visual literacy fostered an incredible sense of cohesion and order across vast distances. The law wasn't locked away in a temple or recited by a privileged few scribes. It was woven into the very fabric of daily life, worn on the body, and displayed in homes and public spaces. It was constant, accessible, and unambiguous. This seamless integration of legal code into material culture ensured compliance not through fear alone, but through understanding and a shared cultural identity. The colors made the law a living, breathing, and visible part of the Wari world. Now, take a closer look at one of those Wari tunics, and you'll see the true genius of their system wasn't just in the colors, but in the intricate dance of geometry that gave those colors meaning. The patterns themselves were the syntax of this visual language, the grammatical rules that turned individual hues into complete sentences of law. A simple zigzag line running along the border of a textile wasn't merely decorative. It could represent the secure, protected path of a state-sanctioned trade route, with each peak and valley symbolizing a specific checkpoint or a tax obligation for merchants. A more complex stepped fret pattern, often called a Greca's design, might function like a legal flowchart for inheritance, visually mapping out the line of succession or the division of property among heirs based on the number of steps and their interlocking connections. These designs were never arbitrary. They were meticulously planned and executed with mathematical precision, their symmetry and repetition serving a crucial purpose beyond beauty. The predictable, orderly nature of these geometric forms subconsciously reinforced the concepts of stability, order, and the unchangeable authority of the law itself. A perfectly symmetrical pattern was a visual metaphor for a well-ordered society, making the rules it conveyed feel inevitable and correct. This marriage of form and function made the laws incredibly memorable. Just as a catchy song lyric or a simple rhyme sticks in your mind, the rhythmic repetition of a geometric motif helped cement the associated rule in the collective memory of the community. As archaeologist Susan Berg has suggested, certain recurring patterns, like interlocking key motifs, likely served as symbols of binding agreements or alliances between different groups within the empire. The arrangement of these patterns on the garment was also loaded with meaning. A design placed prominently on the chest or shoulder might denote a privilege or a high-ranking social role, while a pattern confined to the hem or the back could indicate a more common duty or a restriction. The density of the patterns mattered too. A section of a tunic crowded with complex, overlapping geometric shapes might outline a dense legal code for ceremonial protocols during a major festival, dictating every step from the opening procession to the specific offerings required. In this way, a single textile could function as an entire legal library, its surface divided into different chapters and clauses through the strategic placement of patterns. This system transformed abstract legal concepts into something tangible and instantly understandable. You didn't need to be literate to know your rights or your responsibilities. You just needed to recognize the pattern on your leader's garment or your own clothing. Justice wasn't a mysterious concept debated by elites behind closed doors. It was a visible, accessible part of the visual landscape, woven into the very fabric of everyday life for every member of Wari society, from the highest official to the most common laborer. Picture the scene in a bustling Wari administrative plaza. A local dispute over land boundaries has brought two farmers before a state official. The official doesn't reach for a scroll or a stone tablet to consult the law. Instead, he stands, and the very cloak he wears serves as the primary legal reference. Its distinct pattern of interlocking black and white squares might universally signify codes related to agricultural land division, while the bold red band across his chest immediately communicates his authority to adjudicate. Everyone present, the farmers, the onlookers, even children playing at the edge of the crowd, understands this visual language. The official's garment is more than a uniform. It is a walking, talking compendium of the law, its patterns and colors giving him immediate legitimacy and reminding all witnesses of the rules governing their lives. This seamless integration of legal code into material culture extended far beyond the courtroom. During a major religious ceremony, a high priest would don a robe so densely woven with symbolic imagery that it effectively scripted the entire ritual. Specific sequences of stepped frets might dictate the order of offerings, while a sudden shift to a pattern of concentric circles could signal the moment for communal chanting, ensuring every participant knew their role without a single spoken command. The system was brilliantly pragmatic for tax collection, a constant challenge for any ancient empire. A tax collector traveling to a remote village wouldn't need a complicated ledger or the ability to speak the local dialect. His tunic did the talking for him. A series of colored bands along the hem could clearly indicate the type and quantity of goods expected as tribute, perhaps 2 bands of brown for baskets of dried potatoes, 1 band of blue for a measure of salt, and a thin band of gold thread representing a labor obligation owed to the state. The visual clarity was absolute and left little room for negotiation or misunderstanding. For the common people, this wearable legal system provided a constant, clear understanding of their identity and duties. A weaver might wear a tunic with a subtle, repeating diamond motif on the sleeve, immediately identifying her craft and her membership in a specific artisan class, which came with both privileges and responsibilities, like producing a certain amount of cloth for the state each year. A fisherman's simple poncho might feature wave-like patterns in blue and green, denoting not only his occupation but also the fishing rights assigned to his community. This eliminated the need for vast archives of written records or a massive bureaucracy of literate officials to constantly interpret and enforce the rules. The law was always present, always visible, and universally legible, creating a remarkably efficient and streamlined form of governance that could be consistently applied across the empire's incredibly diverse and rugged terrain. The sheer effectiveness of this approach is powerfully underscored by its longevity. Historical evidence shows that the Inca, who built their empire centuries later, observed and adopted this very practice. They too used specially designed tunics known as unku to denote social status, profession, and legal authority. proving that the Wari's innovative visual legal system was not just a curious cultural artifact, but a genuinely powerful and adaptable tool of statecraft that resonated through the ages. Now, to truly appreciate the brilliance of the Wari system, we need to place it on the global stage of ancient law. Around the same time the Wari were weaving their legal codes, other great civilizations were tackling the same fundamental problem: how to communicate the rules of society, but with wildly different solutions, each a perfect reflection of their own environment and capabilities. Consider the famous Code of Hammurabi from Mesopotamia, etched into a towering black stone stele around 1750 BC. This was law as a permanent public monument. The precise, cuneiform text detailed nearly 300 laws with exacting specificity. If a man does this, then that shall be the penalty. This written system offered incredible detail and permanence, but it came with significant limitations. It was anchored to one place. To know the law, you had to travel to the stele or rely on a literate scribe to read it to you, instantly creating a powerful class of intermediaries between the people and the rules that govern them. Literacy was the key, a key held by very few. On the opposite end of the spectrum were the Celtic peoples of ancient Europe, whose legal traditions were entirely oral. Their laws were not written down but memorized in vast, poetic verses by a special class of bards known as Brithamane, or judges. These individuals spent years training their memories to hold the entire history, genealogy, and legal precedent of their people. This system was incredibly portable and flexible, evolving with each recitation, but it was also fragile. The death of a master bard could mean the loss of centuries of legal wisdom, and the oral nature of the tradition left it vulnerable to subtle, or not so subtle, alteration to suit the powerful. The Wari approach stands in stunning contrast to both. They sidestep the limitations of both stone and speech. Their textile-based system offered the tangible, durable presence of Hammurabi's code. You could see it and touch it, but with the portability of an oral tradition. A legal textile could be carried across the empire, displayed in a new town square, or worn by a traveling official, making the law present everywhere at once. Unlike the Celtic system, the message was fixed in the weave. A pattern couldn't be accidentally misremembered or intentionally changed without physically altering the cloth itself. And most importantly, it required no literacy. The law was communicated through a universal visual language that everyone, from the highest noble to the most common farmer, could be taught to understand. This innovative fusion of strengths placed the Wari centuries ahead of their time. In many ways, their system functions like a modern infographic, a powerful tool that uses visual symbols, color coding, and structured design to convey complex information quickly, clearly, and across language barriers. We see this same principle in everything from airport signage to safety pictograms on cleaning products. The Wari demonstrate that a society doesn't need a written alphabet to achieve sophisticated, large-scale governance. They developed an alternative path to complexity, one that challenged the old assumption that literacy is the sole engine of legal and administrative advancement. They proved that law could be both beautiful and functional, woven into the fabric of life itself. For the Wari, the law was never merely a human invention, it was a divine revelation, and their textiles were the sacred parchment upon which this celestial order was recorded. This spiritual dimension transformed their legal system from a simple set of rules into a profound moral covenant, connecting every aspect of daily life to the will of the gods. Many of the most complex patterns woven into these fabrics are believed to have been inspired by shamanic visions or messages received from the spirit world during rituals. A zigzag motif, for instance, might not just represent a trade route but could be seen as a stylized lightning bolt, a direct symbol of the mountain god's power and his authority over life and death. In this way, the patterns themselves became mediators, sacred conduits bridging the human realm and the divine, ensuring that the laws they conveyed were understood as eternal and unchangeable truths, not the arbitrary decrees of a temporary ruler. The colors chosen for these ceremonial textiles were equally charged with spiritual significance. A radiant gold or yellow, achieved with pigments from rare minerals or flowers, was almost certainly associated with Inti, the powerful sun deity. When a high priest wore a garment shimmering with these solar hues, he wasn't just displaying his rank, he was embodying the god's authority, and the laws encoded in its patterns were thus presented as directives from the sun itself. Similarly, the use of pure, undyed white, often from the finest vicuña wool, likely held connections to ancestors and the spirit world. A white pattern on a funerary textile might outline inheritance laws, but it did so by framing them as the sacred wishes of the departed, giving them a weight far beyond that of any earthly legal code. This fusion meant that to disobey a law was not just a civil offense, it was a sacrilege, an act of disrespect toward the gods and ancestors who had ordained it. This principle came to life most powerfully during religious ceremonies. A high priest officiating a major festival would don a massive, tapestry-like robe that functioned as both ritual garment and ceremonial script. The entire sequence of the event, the order of processions, the specific offerings required for each altar, the songs to be sung, and even periods of mandated fasting could be encoded into the garment's elaborate design. Participants needed only to observe the priest and the symbols on his vestments to know exactly what to do and when to do it. This blended legal and religious compliance into a single, seamless visual experience. A law dictating the offering of a portion of the maize harvest to the state temple, for example, was thus presented not as a tax but as a pious duty, a necessary offering to ensure the sun god's favor and the continuation of the agricultural cycle. This spiritual layer provided a powerful, dual enforcement mechanism. Adherence to the law was encouraged not only by the fear of earthly punishment from a state official, but by the deeper, more pervasive fear of divine retribution, drought, famine, or misfortune brought on by angered deities. This made the legal system incredibly resilient and widely respected. It was far harder to challenge a law believed to be handed down from the gods than one issued from a chieftain's compound. This divine sanction granted the state immense stability, weaving the social order into the very fabric of the cosmos and ensuring its continuity across generations. Think of a wary diplomatic mission arriving at the settlement of a newly contacted culture in the highlands. The diplomats don't arrive with threats or armed escorts as their primary tool. Instead, they come bearing gifts. But these are not simple offerings of friendship. They unroll an exquisitely woven textile, a masterpiece of color and pattern, and present it to the local chief. To the untrained eye, it is a stunning work of art, but to the wary and soon to the recipients, it is something far more potent, a proposed treaty, a statement of terms, and a symbol of a new political reality, all encoded into the fabric. This was diplomacy woven into being. The design of such a gift was a masterclass in political nuance. The central field of the textile might feature classic, authoritative wari patterns, a bold series of stepped frets in the empire's signature crimson and gold, clearly communicating the power and structure of the state making the offer. But woven into the borders, the clever artisans might have incorporated symbolic motifs sacred to the local people, perhaps a specific animal revered as an ancestor or a geometric form representing their local mountain deity. This subtle customization was a brilliant act of political theater. It said, "We respect your identity and your gods, and there is a place for them within our system." while simultaneously making the underlying message of Wari supremacy more palatable and less foreign. Accepting the gift was the first step toward accepting its terms. By wearing this gifted tunic, the local leader would literally be wrapping himself in the new legal framework of the Wari Empire, visually signaling his submission and new allegiance to his own people every single day. This was soft power at its most sophisticated. The widespread distribution of these textiles was a key strategy for imperial integration. It fostered a shared visual language across dozens of distinct cultures. A leader from the coast and a leader from the jungle, though separated by vast distances and completely different languages, would both understand the meaning of a specific pattern denoting a trade agreement or a particular color sequence outlining tax obligations. This created a powerful, unifying brand identity for the empire that transcended spoken words. This shared visual vocabulary was incredibly effective at reducing rebellion. It's far more difficult to rally people against a system that has visually and materially integrated itself into your daily life and leadership than it is to oppose a distant, abstract authority. Furthermore, these textiles made resource extraction the lifeblood of any empire remarkably efficient. A tax collector didn't need to speak the local language. He simply wore a tunic whose patterns explicitly displayed the goods required, whether it was bundles of quinoa, bags of salt, or lengths of timber. The law was not open to negotiation because it was literally woven into the very fabric of the authority standing before them. The portability of this system cannot be overstated. A single messenger could carry an entire portfolio of diplomatic agreements, tax codes, and legal decrees folded neatly over his shoulder, ready to be unfurled and put into immediate effect anywhere in the empire. This was a technology of governance perfectly suited to the vast, mountainous terrain of the Andes, enabling the Wari to project their power and administer their laws across incredible distances with a consistency that would have been the envy of any ancient bureaucracy reliant on heavy clay tablets or perishable papyrus. In this way, a simple piece of cloth became one of history's most elegant and effective tools for building an empire without constant conquest. Behind every intricate pattern and every symbolic hue lay the true architects of the Wari legal system, the master weavers who were far more than simple artisans. These were the legal scribes, the code makers, and in many cases they were women of immense skill and status. In the specialized workshops attached to administrative centers and elite compounds, these women undertook the monumental responsibility of translating the abstract concepts of law and social order into tangible, woven reality. Their role demanded a dual mastery that few in the empire could claim. First, they had to achieve technical perfection, manipulating countless threads on complex backstrap looms with a precision that could produce hundreds of threads per inch, ensuring every geometric shape was sharp and every color boundary was flawless. A single misaligned thread in a pattern denoting a tax obligation or an inheritance right could potentially lead to widespread misinterpretation and legal dispute. But their expertise went far beyond the mechanical. These weavers were also required to be walking libraries of symbolic meaning. They had to memorize the vast and complex lexicon of Wari visual language, knowing that a specific shade of blue, when placed next to a stepped diamond motif, communicated water rights for a valley community, while that same blue beside a wavy line might indicate fishing regulations for coastal subjects. This knowledge was likely passed down through generations within certain elite families or guilds, a closely guarded and highly respected oral tradition. These women were not merely executing orders from male rulers. Evidence suggests they held significant interpretive power. A priest or official might decree that a new law was needed concerning the storage of grain after a drought. It would fall to the master weaver to decide how to encode that, which pattern best represented granaries, which color sequence could indicate quantity and time, and how to integrate this new clause into the existing visual grammar of a ceremonial textile without creating confusion. In this way, they acted as legal editors and graphic designers, shaping the very presentation of the law and, by extension, how it was understood and internalized by the populace. This granted them a form of soft power that was every bit as influential as the overt authority of the male administrators who wore their creations. While those men were the public face of the law, these women were its authors and archivists. Their esteemed position challenges the simplistic view that ancient Andean societies were purely patriarchal. It reveals a more nuanced structure where gender roles offer different but equally crucial paths to influence. The weaver's contribution was foundational, not peripheral. They were the indispensable technicians of social order, the ones who literally wove the threads of authority, duty, and identity into a coherent system that held a vast and diverse empire together for centuries. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that history's most profound architects often worked not in stone, but in thread, and their stories are waiting to be unraveled from the very fabrics they left behind. Imagine a family heirloom not locked away in a chest but brought out for a village gathering to settle a boundary dispute. The elder unfolds a textile, its edges softened by time, and its vibrant cochineal reds faded to a muted rust, yet the crucial stepped pattern along the border remains perfectly clear. This was the Wari equivalent of pulling a legal precedent from the archives. While a papyrus scroll could be torn, a clay tablet shattered, or an oral tradition slowly distorted with each retelling, these woven legal documents possessed a remarkable resilience. They could withstand the rigors of time and travel, and perhaps most ingeniously, they could be repaired. A skilled weaver could carefully reweave a damaged section, reinforcing a faded pattern or replacing a frayed edge, thus preserving the integrity of the law itself for another generation. This reparability made the legal system incredibly robust, capable of enduring periods of conflict or social upheaval without losing its foundational principles. Specific textiles became communal reference guides, curated and protected by certain families or guilds who acted as the guardians of this knowledge. A textile encoding irrigation rights for a particular valley, for instance, would be carefully stored and only presented during seasonal meetings to allocate water usage, functioning with the same authority as a modern land survey map or a binding legal contract. This practice of preserving law in cloth created a powerful link to the past, allowing the Wari to maintain a remarkably consistent legal framework over centuries. The core principles, the meanings of key colors, and the most sacred geometric patterns remained constant, providing stability and a sense of timeless order. Yet, the system also allowed for subtle evolution. A weaver repairing a textile might slightly adjust a pattern to reflect a new interpretation or to incorporate a symbol from a recently integrated community, allowing the law to adapt without losing its essential character. This concept of the textile as living archive represents a profoundly innovative approach to historical preservation, one that embedded the law not in static, inaccessible records, but in functional, beautiful objects that were integral to the daily and ceremonial life of the entire society. Unraveling the legal code of the Wari is a task that demands the patience of a detective and the precision of a scientist, a challenge that modern archaeologists have embraced with groundbreaking results. For scholars like Mary Frame, each recovered textile fragment is a piece of a vast, continent-spanning puzzle. Her work, and that of her colleagues, involves meticulously cataloging thousands of these fragments, some no larger than a postage stamp, sorting them by site, weave structure, and most importantly, their recurring patterns. The true breakthrough comes from cross-referencing these patterns with their archaeological context. A textile found in an administrative center in the capital city of Wari, for instance, might feature a complex, multi-layered geometric design. That same exact pattern, found on a tunic in a tomb hundreds of miles away in a coastal province, strongly suggests it was not merely decorative but represented a specific, widespread legal statute or a high-ranking administrative role recognized across the empire. Conversely, simpler, more repetitive motifs found exclusively in commoners' graves likely denoted trade or social class. This contextual mapping allows researchers to slowly build a dictionary, matching visual symbols to their likely societal meanings. The scientific tools at their disposal have revolutionized this decoding process. Radiocarbon dating allows archaeologists to place these textiles on a precise timeline, showing how certain patterns emerged, evolved, or fell out of use over the centuries of Wari rule. This isn't just about knowing the age, it's about tracking the evolution of laws themselves. A pattern that appears suddenly after the conquest of a new region might represent the legal integration of that territory. Fiber analysis can trace the geographic origin of the wool itself, revealing whether a textile was produced in a state workshop in the highlands and then distributed, or woven locally using imported patterns, giving us incredible insight into how consistently the legal code was enforced from the center. But perhaps the most dramatic advances have come from digital imaging. Specialized techniques like multispectral imaging can detect the faintest chemical traces of dyes that have long since faded to the human eye. A section of fabric that appears to be a uniform, dull brown under normal light might, under these advanced cameras, reveal itself to have once been a brilliant tapestry of red, blue, and gold bands, each color restoring a lost piece of the legal message. This painstaking detective work has completely upended older, simplistic views of pre-Inca Andean societies. It paints a picture of the Wari not as a rudimentary precursor to a more advanced civilization, but as sophisticated legal innovators in their own right. They developed a complex system of non-verbal communication that was perfectly adapted to their environment and their challenges, a system of governance that was both incredibly effective and breathtakingly elegant. The patterns we see are not abstract art. They are the frozen grammar of a lost language of power, duty, and identity, and we are only now beginning to learn how to read it. This understanding of the Wari as master lawmakers forces us to completely reconsider the economic engine that their legal system was designed to regulate and protect. This system transformed the humble textile into the very lifeblood of the Wari economy, a multi-purpose tool that functioned as currency, contract, and tax record all woven into one. Imagine a marketplace where a farmer doesn't barter with potatoes or coins for a new tool. Instead, he offers the merchant a finely woven belt featuring a specific, state-approved pattern of alternating brown and green diamonds. That pattern isn't just attractive. It's a legally recognized unit of value, perhaps equivalent to 100 pounds of maize. The merchant accepts it without question, knowing he can later use that same belt to pay his own taxes to a visiting official or trade it to a weaver for a different, more ornate textile that signifies a higher value. This created a remarkably fluid and trustworthy economic ecosystem where the medium of exchange was also a guaranteed store of value, backed by the full authority and stability of the empire. The patterns themselves became a form of denomination. A simple, repetitive motif in common colors might represent a lower value, suitable for everyday market transactions, while a complex, intricate design incorporating rare dyes like cochineal red or vicuña fiber would signify a much higher worth, used for significant purchases or state-level finance. This elegant solution prevented counterfeiting. as the technical skill and access to specific dyes required to replicate these complex patterns were tightly controlled by state-sanctioned workshops. You couldn't just mint a fake coin. You'd need the knowledge of a master weaver and the resources of the empire itself to produce a fraudulent high-value textile. This concept extended powerfully into the realm of taxation and tribute, the essential fuels for any ancient state. The Wari system streamlined this process to an extraordinary degree. A remote village high in the Andes might receive its annual tax obligation not as a written scroll it couldn't read, but as a small, portable sample textile delivered by an official. This sample would display a precise pattern, say, a sequence of blue and white stepped blocks and a specific size. The village elders would understand immediately that they were required to produce, by the next full moon, 10 textiles of this exact pattern and dimensions. In fulfilling this obligation, they weren't just giving away goods, they were literally weaving their tax payment into existence. The finished textiles would be collected by the state and entered into the imperial economy. Some would be used to pay soldiers garrisoned in distant forts, their uniforms effectively serving as their salary. Others would be distributed to government officials as part of their compensation, and still others might be stored in state warehouses as a form of wealth reserve or used as diplomatic gifts to secure alliances. This is where the brilliant insight of economist Carl Polanyi truly comes to life. He argued that in many ancient societies, the economy was not a separate, distinct sphere of life governed by its own abstract rules of supply and demand. Instead, it was embedded within the broader social, religious, and legal structures. For the Wari, there was no separation between an economic transaction, a legal requirement, and a social duty. A textile was all these things simultaneously. To produce a tax textile was to fulfill a civic duty, to participate in a legally mandated system, and to contribute to the economic health of the empire, all through the single act of weaving. This integration minimized bureaucratic overhead and the potential for fraud. The value and purpose of every textile were self-evident in its design, requiring no separate ledgers, receipts, or complex accounting systems. The system was its own record, a durable, distributed, and incredibly efficient economic engine that powered one of the ancient America's first great empires, proving that value could be measured not in weight of precious metal, but in the skill of a weaver's hand and the symbolic power of a pattern. The fall of the Wari Empire around 1000 AD did not mean the end of their revolutionary ideas. Instead, their administrative genius went underground, simmering for centuries within the cultures they had once dominated, waiting for a new power to recognize its potential. That power emerged in the form of the Inca, and when they began their own meteoric rise in the 15th century, they did not start from scratch. They inherited a blueprint for empire, a sophisticated toolkit of statecraft refined by the Wari, and they adapted it with breathtaking ambition to manage a realm that became the largest the ancient Americas had ever seen. The most visible and potent inheritance was the concept of a wearable legal code. The Inca took the Wari's idea of pattern-coded tunics and standardized it into a system even more pervasive and detailed. Their version, the unku, was a knee-length tunic whose design was a precise visual resume of the wearer. The state distributed these garments, and the patterns woven into them were not a matter of personal choice but a legally mandated uniform. A soldier's unku featured a bold, black and white checkerboard pattern, instantly identifying his profession and his obligation to serve. A provincial governor's tunic might incorporate a specific geometric motif unique to his region, denoting his administrative authority, while also featuring the classic Inca key pattern that signaled his ultimate loyalty to the emperor in Cusco. This system allowed anyone in the sprawling empire, from the highlands to the coast, to immediately understand an individual's rank, ethnic origin, and role within the vast imperial machinery, maintaining the Wari's vision of law as a visible, accessible, and unifying force. But the Inca faced a challenge of scale the Wari never did, and their true innovation was in combining this woven language with another, even more versatile technology, the quipu. These intricate arrays of knotted strings are often described as a recording device, a way to track census data, tribute, and stores in royal warehouses. However, many scholars now believe their function was far more profound, potentially encoding narratives, laws, and historical records in a complex three-dimensional language of knots, colors, and positions. Think of it as a merger of systems. The Wari's brilliant visual textile code for immediate, on-the-ground social identification was paired with the Inca's portable, dense quipu for detailed record-keeping and long-distance communication. A tax collector would wear his status and authority on his unku, while the quipu he carried could contain the exact numerical details of what each household in a village owed, creating a seamless and incredibly efficient administrative package. This tandem use represents the ultimate refinement of the Andean visual language model. The Wari had proven that complex information could be effectively communicated without alphabetic writing. The Inca took that proof of concept and scaled it up, creating a hybrid system that managed millions of people across thousands of miles of some of the most difficult terrain on Earth. This was not mere imitation, it was evolution. The Inca saw the power of the Wari model and built upon it, demonstrating its incredible adaptability. This continuity is why scholars like Terence Daltroy argue so compellingly that the Wari were the true foundational architects of Andean statecraft. They were the pioneers who first solved the core problems of governing a vast, diverse region. They developed the models for road systems, for territorial administration, and most importantly, for non-verbal, symbolic communication that could bind everything together. The Inca were the brilliant successors who studied this blueprint, learned from its strengths and its limitations, and then executed it on a grander scale. This legacy completely transforms our understanding of the Wari. They are not a mysterious, dead-end culture overshadowed by their more famous successors. They are the intellectual forebears, the innovators whose ideas became the bedrock upon which one of the world's most magnificent empires was built. Their story is a powerful reminder that history is not just a series of isolated peaks of achievement, but a connected range where each summit is made possible by the one that came before it. The echoes of their woven laws resonate through centuries, a testament to an ingenuity so effective that it shaped the course of an entire continent. Yet for all its brilliance, this woven web of law was not without its fragile threads. The very portability and durability that made textiles such an effective medium also introduced significant vulnerabilities. Consider the ever-present risk of counterfeiting. While replicating the empire's most complex, state-produced patterns required immense skill and access to tightly controlled dyes, simpler designs denoting trade rights or tax obligations could potentially be copied by skilled local weavers. A village might produce a textile that mimicked the official pattern for a lower tax rate, attempting to deceive a visiting collector. The state would have needed a system of verification, perhaps relying on the quality of the wool, the specific dye shades achievable only with official materials, or the testimony of trusted weavers to authenticate these legal documents, creating an administrative layer of complexity they sought to avoid. Then there was the inevitable toll of time and use. A textile worn daily by an official, exposed to sun, rain, and the friction of travel, would slowly fade. The vibrant cochineal red that signified authority could dull to a faint pink, and precise geometric patterns might become blurred at the edges from wear. A faded textile didn't just become less beautiful, it risked becoming legally ambiguous. Was that a series of diamonds or simply a smudge of color? Did that faded band once indicate a labor obligation or a specific quantity of grain? This natural decay required a robust system of renewal and replacement. Master weavers in state workshops would have been tasked not only with creating new laws, but with meticulously reproducing old ones, ensuring that the legal code remained legible across generations. This was a constant, resource-intensive effort to fight against entropy itself. Furthermore, the system's greatest strength, its reliance on a shared visual language, was also a potential point of failure. It required what we might call universal cultural literacy. From the highest noble to the most humble farmer, everyone needed to be taught and continuously reminded of what these patterns and colors meant. In the heartland of the empire, this was likely second nature, learned from childhood, but in newly conquered or distant territories with their own deep-rooted artistic traditions, imposing this new visual vocabulary would have been a slow and difficult process. A pattern the Wari used to signify water rights might be misinterpreted by a coastal culture as a symbol for tidal patterns, or something entirely different based on their own symbolic history. This opened the door to dangerous misunderstandings, deliberate misinterpretations, or even silent resistance, where communities paid lip service to the new laws while privately adhering to their own traditional meanings. As the empire expanded, maintaining this consistent understanding across countless diverse groups would have placed an enormous strain on the administrative system, requiring a core of educators, interpreters, and enforcers to constantly reinforce the official visual lexicon. These inherent challenges, the risks of fraud, the ravages of time, and the difficulties of cultural translation likely became increasingly burdensome as the Wari Empire grew older and more complex. They hint at the internal pressures that may have contributed to its eventual decline, proving that even the most ingenious systems contain the seeds of their own vulnerability. It's a sobering thought that the entire story of the Wari legal system, this breathtaking innovation we've been exploring, could have been lost to us forever, rotted away into dust and forgotten by time. The survival of these intricate textiles for over 1,000 years is nothing short of an archaeological miracle, a gift handed down to us by the unique and unforgiving environment of the Andes Mountains. The high-altitude deserts of Peru, where the Wari built their empire, possess a very specific set of climatic conditions that act as a perfect natural preservation chamber. The air is incredibly thin, cold, and most importantly, dry. This combination is the ultimate enemy of the microbes and fungi that, in more humid climates, would feast on organic materials like cotton and wool, reducing them to nothing in a matter of decades. In the lowland rainforests of the Amazon or the damp coastlines of other ancient civilizations, textiles simply don't survive. They dissolve, leaving behind only pottery, stone, and metal to tell a fragmented story. But in the arid tombs and sealed caves where the Wari buried their elite, often in dedicated funerary towers called chulpas, their woven legal codes were essentially freeze-dried by history. They lay undisturbed for centuries, sheltered from moisture, oxygen, and sunlight, waiting patiently for modern archaeologists to discover them. This incredible preservation is powerfully illustrated by the spectacular finds at a site like the Castillo de Huame, a royal Wari tomb on the north coast of Peru. Here, archaeologists led by Milos Giers made a discovery that sent ripples through the historical world: an intact imperial tomb, untouched by looters, containing the remains of 58 noblewomen and over 1,000 grave goods. Among the most stunning finds were hundreds of textiles in a state of preservation so remarkable that their colors were still vibrant and their patterns razor-sharp. Unfolding one of these fabrics was like opening a legal textbook that had been closed for a millennium, its pages still perfectly legible. These weren't just fragments or faded scraps. They were complete garments, tapestries, and headdresses, each one a complex document brimming with encoded information about status, duty, and law. The dry sand and stable temperatures of the coastal burial site had acted as a perfect custodian, guarding this priceless archive against the ravages of time. It's discoveries like these that allow scholars to make direct comparisons between textiles from different regions and time periods, to see the evolution of a specific pattern, or to confirm that a certain color scheme was indeed reserved for the highest echelons of power. Without this environmental intervention, our understanding of the Wari would be based on guesswork inferred from pottery shards and the foundations of buildings. We would have no idea that their greatest intellectual achievement was woven, not written. The survival of these artifacts is a stark reminder of the incredible fragility of the historical record, and a testament to the role of sheer luck in the story of human knowledge. It forces us to ask a humbling question: how many other sophisticated systems, how many other ingenious forms of communication from ancient cultures in less forgiving climates have vanished without a trace, leaving us with a permanently incomplete picture of our past? The dry air of the Andes didn't just preserve cloth, it preserved a revolutionary idea, allowing us to finally appreciate the Wari not just as conquerors or artists, but as visionary lawmakers whose influence was literally woven into the fabric of their world. In the fabric of Wari society, your station was not a hidden secret but a declaration woven into the very clothes you wore. This was a world where social hierarchy was not just understood but visually enforced, a living map of privilege and obligation rendered in brilliant color and precise geometry. The system was designed for instant recognition. A member of the elite would be adorned in a tunic of staggering complexity, a dense tapestry of interlocking motifs woven with the finest vicuña wool and the rarest, most difficult to produce dyes like cochineal red. This garment was a walking testament to their power, its intricate patterns likely encoding specific legal exemptions, hereditary rights to resources, or authority to command labor from others. In stark contrast, a common laborer's attire would be far simpler, perhaps a plain tunic with a single, repetitive band of stripes in more common, earth-toned colors. This visual shorthand was brutally efficient. It made the social order instantly legible to everyone from the capital city to the most remote village. There was no need for a complex bureaucracy to constantly remind people of their place. The message was reinforced with every glance, every interaction, every waking moment. This visibility served a crucial function for the state. It reduced the need for overt, violent enforcement. The law was not just written, it was worn, making disobedience not only a legal transgression but a visible act of social defiance against a seemingly natural and immutable order. This elegant system, however, came with a profound and deeply entrenched cost: the cementing of inequality. Your position in the Wari world was not something you could earn or aspire to through talent or hard work. It was assigned at birth, predetermined by the family you were born into, and then literally wrapped around you for life. A diamond motif on a noble's tunic might grant them exemption from manual labor taxes, a privilege enjoyed simply by virtue of their lineage. Conversely, a series of horizontal bars on a farmer's poncho could permanently bind him and his descendants to work a specific plot of land, his agricultural output heavily taxed for the benefit of the state and the elite. This visual coding made social mobility virtually impossible. The patterns acted as both identifier and cage, ensuring that the son of a farmer would become a farmer, and the daughter of a noble would marry into nobility, perpetuating the same power structures generation after generation. The textile legal code, for all its brilliance in creating order, was fundamentally a tool for maintaining a rigid, top-down power structure. It provided clarity and predictability, but at the expense of fairness and individual potential. This is the central paradox of the Wari system. It was simultaneously a unifying force that created a shared identity across a vast empire, and a divisive tool that hardened the barriers between classes, ensuring that the benefits of that empire were distributed not by contribution, but by birthright. The very fabrics that held the civilization together also wove the threads of inequality into its permanent foundation. Consider the moment a young Wari girl on the cusp of adulthood is presented with her first fully patterned tunic by her mother or a community elder. This isn't just a new piece of clothing, it is the moment she receives her social and legal operating manual, woven into the very fabric she will wear every day. As her fingers trace the intricate designs, she is learning the boundaries and possibilities of her life. A series of small, interconnected diamonds along the hem might clearly indicate her clan's specific marriage protocols, perhaps the requirement to marry within a certain social group or the dowry expectations her family must fulfill. A distinct color band, perhaps a unique shade of yellow achieved from a rare flower, could signal her inheritance rights, detailing what portion of family land or resources she is entitled to upon her parents' passing. This garment becomes a constant, wearable reminder of who she is, who she can become, and what her community expects from her. It shapes her identity from that day forward, integrating legal consciousness into the most fundamental act of daily life, getting dressed. For a traveling merchant, the system provided a different kind of security. Before entering a bustling highland market, he would carefully smooth out his patterned cloak, its design acting as both his license to trade and his guide to proper conduct. A broad border of black and white checks might grant him the general right to sell goods, while a specific arrangement of blue triangles within that border could denote the particular taxes or tariffs he owed on the obsidian blades he carried. He wouldn't need to seek out a scribe to read a scroll or worry about a language barrier with a local official. His compliance was displayed openly on his back. This clarity reduced conflict and fostered trust in commercial transactions. The patterns prevented ambiguity, creating a predictable environment for business where everyone understood the rules of the game. This wearable legal code provided a powerful sense of structure and order, reducing the anxieties that come with social ambiguity. While this system would feel incredibly restrictive to our modern sense of individual freedom, for the Wari, it offered something equally valuable: certainty. Your path was laid out, your duties were clear, and your place in the community was visually affirmed every time you looked at your neighbor. This deep integration of law and personal adornment made legal awareness not a separate subject to be studied, but an intrinsic part of self-expression and social interaction, weaving the threads of duty and identity into a single, inseparable tapestry of daily life. Far from being a rigid, unchanging code etched in stone, the Wari legal system was a remarkably fluid and responsive institution, its evolution literally woven into the fabric of new generations of textiles. Imagine the master weavers in their state workshops receiving a directive not to create a new law from nothing, but to find a way to visually encode a pressing new reality. A prolonged drought, for example, gripping the highlands for several seasons, would have forced a drastic reconsideration of water rights, a matter of survival. In response, these artisan scribes might have designed a new, complex pattern, perhaps a series of interconnected, narrowing channels in varying shades of blue and gray to be incorporated into the tunics of water overseers. This new motif would instantly communicate updated, stricter regulations for irrigation canal usage, prioritization for certain terraces, and penalties for hoarding, effectively creating a wearable water conservation policy that could be distributed and understood across the affected region without a single word being spoken. Similarly, the conquest of a coastal culture rich in maritime resources would present new economic opportunities and legal complexities. To govern this new territory and its unique trade, the Wari legal language would need new vocabulary. Weavers might have begun to integrate marine motifs, stylized waves, fish, or seabirds into the geometric patterns that govern trade regulations. A textile dictating the rules for a coastal market might feature these new symbols alongside traditional highland patterns, creating a hybrid design that legally recognized and incorporated the new province's identity while still framing it within the overarching authority of the Wari state. This wasn't a top-down imposition of foreign law so much as a visual negotiation, a way of saying, your world is now part of ours, and here is how we will manage it together. The archaeological record provides stunning proof of this adaptability. By examining textiles from different time periods and regions, scholars can trace the gradual introduction and spread of new symbols. A pattern that appears only in later period tombs in the capital city might be found woven into textiles from a far-flung province decades earlier, suggesting a legal innovation that began at the periphery to address a local issue and was so effective that it was eventually adopted empire-wide. This reveals a living, breathing legal tradition, one that could absorb shock, integrate new ideas, and respond to environmental and social pressures without collapsing or requiring a revolutionary overhaul. The core visual grammar, the reliance on symmetry, geometric shapes, and a shared color symbolism remained the constant, unshakable foundation, much like the constitution of a modern nation. But the specific laws woven into that framework could be amended, updated, and refined, allowing the Wari Empire to endure for centuries not through rigid control, but through intelligent and graceful adaptation. This dynamic quality hints at a sophisticated understanding of governance, one that accepted change as inevitable and had a built-in mechanism for managing it, ensuring the empire's laws never became so outdated that they snapped under the pressure of a changing world. This profound understanding of law as something living, not static, is perhaps best illustrated by one of the most fascinating Wari practices, the ritual retirement of legal textiles. Unlike a stone stele that stands unchanged for millennia, a woven law had a lifespan. Over decades of use, even the most durable fabric would eventually succumb to wear. Colors would fade, threads would fray, and patterns could become indistinct. But for the Wari, this physical decay was not a problem to be ignored. It was an opportunity, a scheduled moment for societal reflection and renewal. They would not simply discard a worn-out textile like old clothing. Instead, its retirement was a ceremonial event, a public acknowledgement that laws, like the people they governed and the fabrics that carried them, had a natural life cycle. Imagine a gathering in a central plaza where a community elder holds up a faded mantle that for generations had dictated the rules for water distribution from a shared reservoir. The pattern, once a brilliant, unmistakable blue, is now a pale shadow. The ceremony that follows is solemn and deeply symbolic. The textile might be carefully unraveled, thread by thread, in a public demonstration of its legal power being formally dissolved. Alternatively, it could be consigned to a sacred fire with the smoke carrying the spirit of the old law back to the gods, or buried in a consecrated pit, returning it to the earth. These acts were far more than just disposal. They were a form of legal repeal. The physical destruction of the object made the expiration of the law it represented absolutely tangible and irrevocable for the entire community. It was a powerful visual and participatory declaration. This rule no longer binds us. These rituals were almost certainly accompanied by prayers, songs, and offerings to the ancestors and deities, framing legal change not as a secular act of bureaucracy, but as a sacred transition. This spiritual layer was crucial for fostering collective acceptance. It transformed what could have been a contentious political update into a respectful, divinely sanctioned passage. The community wasn't just throwing out an old rule. They were gratefully retiring a system that had served its purpose and was now making way for a new order. This process prevented the dangerous accumulation of obsolete, conflicting, or unenforceable laws that can plague more rigid legal systems. It built a necessary and regular mechanism for reform directly into the fabric of governance. Following the retirement, a new textile would often be presented, a fresh, vibrant cloth bearing an updated pattern. This new design might incorporate slight modifications to the water distribution rules based on recent climate shifts, or perhaps integrate a symbol from a new community that had recently joined the irrigation cooperative. The ceremony thus seamlessly combined an ending with a beginning, using the retirement of the old to legitimize and celebrate the introduction of the new. This practice reveals a sophisticated philosophical understanding that for a legal system to remain healthy and respected, it cannot be frozen in time. It must be able to breathe, adapt, and occasionally shed its skin, ensuring it always serves the living society it was created to protect. It's almost startling to realize how deeply the Wari's visual language echoes in our own daily lives, centuries later, and in a world they could never have imagined. We are surrounded by a modern ecosystem of symbols that function with the very same principles as those ancient Andean textiles, proving that the human brain's preference for visual shorthand is truly timeless. Consider the simple, powerful red octagon of a stop sign. You don't need to be able to read the word "stop" to understand its command. The color and the shape alone convey an unambiguous, legally binding instruction that transcends language, exactly like a specific Wari pattern denoting a sacred boundary or a trade tax. This is not a coincidence. It's the continued evolution of a universal need for clear, instant communication. Our digital world has exploded with this same concept. Emojis are the perfect contemporary parallel. A single heart symbol can express love, support, or gratitude across linguistic divides, while a thumbs up can seal an agreement or express approval as effectively as any written contract. We've developed a complex, rapidly evolving lexicon of these tiny images that carry immense emotional and social weight, relying on a shared, culturally specific understanding to function. A winking face can change the entire tone of a message from serious to sarcastic, a nuance that would be difficult to convey quickly with words alone, especially to a non-native speaker. This is the digital descendant of a Wari weaver choosing a specific zigzag to indicate a playful exception to a market rule. Furthermore, the rise of infographics and data visualization in media, education, and business is a direct continuation of the Wari philosophy. Complex statistical information about global climate change, economic trends, or public health is now routinely distilled into colorful charts, maps, and illustrated diagrams. These modern textiles allow us to absorb complicated data stories at a glance, making the abstract concrete and the overwhelming manageable. A well-designed infographic about vaccination rates uses color-coding greens for high coverage, reds for low, and simple iconography to communicate a public health status report more effectively than a dense paragraph of text ever could. This is precisely what the Wari achieved with their tunics and tapestries. They turned the abstract complexities of legal codes and social hierarchies into a format that was immediately accessible to every member of their society, regardless of their literacy or native tongue. Corporate branding operates on this same principle of instantaneous recognition. The iconic swoosh of a Nike logo or the golden arches of McDonald's are not just pretty pictures. They are vessels loaded with meaning, conveying ideas about athleticism, speed, affordability, and consistency without a single word. They function as silent ambassadors for their companies, building identity and trust through visual repetition, much like the recurring patterns on a wary official's mantle would build recognition for his authority and the laws he represented. This comparison does more than just draw a clever historical parallel. It fundamentally elevates our understanding of the Wari achievement. They weren't just a unique, isolated culture with a curious practice. They were early pioneers of a core human communication strategy, masters of a visual language that we are still refining and expanding today. Their system demonstrates a profound understanding of cognitive efficiency, the brain's ability to process and remember images far more quickly and reliably than strings of text or speech. By embedding their laws into the visual landscape of everyday life, they ensured compliance and understanding through the most direct and durable channel possible. Their innovation stands as a powerful testament to the idea that you don't need advanced technology to create a sophisticated communication network. Sometimes all you need is a loom, a palette of vibrant dyes, and the creative genius to see that the most effective laws aren't just heard or read, but are seen and remembered by all. Yet beneath the surface of this elegant system lay a profound and unsettling vulnerability, the potential for absolute control. The very clarity and uniformity that made Wari legal textiles so effective also placed immense power in the hands of those who designed and distributed them. Imagine a ruling elite deciding to consolidate their authority or squeeze more tribute from a distant province. A master weaver in a state workshop could be instructed to subtly alter a pattern, perhaps adding an extra band of color to a tax collector's tunic that increased the required grain tribute by a significant margin. For the average citizen, this wasn't a law being debated in a public forum. It was a seemingly small, visual change on a garment they were conditioned to obey without question. There was no written record to compare it to, no alternative version of the law stored in a temple archive that a dissenting voice could point to. The law was what the powerful said it was, and it was displayed on their backs, leaving little room for challenge or reinterpretation. This control over the means of communication created a system that was inherently top-down, where ordinary people were consumers of the law, not participants in its creation. This dynamic raises timeless questions about transparency and accountability in governance. A society that receives its laws through a single, state-controlled visual channel is incredibly susceptible to manipulation. The patterns could easily be used as tools for propaganda, weaving narratives of elite divinity and the naturalness of the social order into every public ceremony and everyday interaction. Dissent could be visually marginalized. A community that resisted might find its traditional symbols excluded from new textiles, or worse, its people forced to wear patterns that marked them as subservient or rebellious. The system, for all its inclusive appearance, could be expertly wielded to enforce conformity and suppress alternative viewpoints, solidifying inequality not through force alone, but through a constant, subtle, and inescapable visual rhetoric. This duality is eerily familiar in our modern world. We are surrounded by our own sophisticated visual codes, corporate logos, political symbols, and the curated imagery of social media feeds. These tools, much like Wari textiles, can be used for empowerment, creating shared identity and spreading valuable information quickly. But they can also be used to manipulate public opinion, obscure the truth, and reinforce harmful power structures. The story of the Wari challenges us to look critically at the visual media we consume every day. Who controls these symbols? What messages are they designed to convey? And what alternatives are we not seeing? The ancient weavers of the Andes remind us that every communication technology, no matter how brilliant, carries with it the potential for both unity and control, and that the power to shape what people see is often the power to shape what they believe. The enduring legacy of the Wari offers us a powerful set of lessons, a masterclass in communication that feels startlingly relevant in our own complex, information-saturated world. Their most profound insight was recognizing that the most effective way to unite diverse groups isn't through forcing a single language, but through developing a shared visual vocabulary. In an empire of many tongues, they built a bridge made not of words, but of symbols and colors that could be understood by everyone, from a coastal fisherman to a highland miner. This principle resonates deeply today, where our globalized societies are often mosaics of cultures and languages. Imagine the potential of applying this ancient wisdom to modern challenges using clear, universally recognizable pictograms and symbols in public health campaigns, immigration documentation, or international safety protocols, ensuring critical information transcends linguistic barriers and reaches every member of a community. Furthermore, the Wari understood that for a law to be respected, it must be durable and ever-present. Their textile-based system ensured the law wasn't locked away in an inaccessible archive. It was integrated into the fabric of daily existence, worn on the body and displayed in public spaces. This constant, tangible presence made the legal framework a living part of the culture, not an abstract set of rules to be occasionally referenced. This stands in stark contrast to our modern reality, where dense legal codes are often buried in impenetrable documents and websites, inaccessible and incomprehensible to the average person. The Wari challenge us to make our own laws more visible and integrated into our daily environments, perhaps through innovative public art that encodes civic responsibilities or digital interfaces that transform complex regulations into clear, visual flowcharts. Perhaps their greatest lesson is in the elegance of low-tech, high-impact innovation. The Wari achieved a monumental feat of administration without an alphabet, without digital networks, and without a massive, literate bureaucracy. They looked at the tools they had: the loom, the vibrant dyes of their environment, and the human capacity for pattern recognition, and they reimagined them into something revolutionary. This is a crucial reminder that solving complex problems doesn't always require inventing something brand new. Sometimes, the most brilliant solutions come from creatively repurposing the tools already at hand. In an age obsessed with the next technological breakthrough, the Wari whisper a different truth: that profound innovation is often about perception and creativity, not just processing power. They teach us that clarity, simplicity, and a deep understanding of human cognition can be more powerful than the most advanced but poorly designed technology. Their story encourages us to look at our own existing tools, our smartphones, our social networks, our public spaces, and ask how we might creatively reimagine them to foster better understanding, stronger communities, and a more just and accessible society for all. So as we reach the end of our journey, the true marvel of the Wari civilization comes into full view. They achieved something that feels both ancient and astonishingly modern. They built a vast, complex empire without a written word, governed not by force alone, but by a shared visual language woven into the very clothes their people wore. Their textile-based legal system stands as a breathtaking testament to human ingenuity, a solution of such elegance and efficiency that it resonates across more than 1,000 years. They combine the precision of law with the beauty of art and the clarity of communication, creating a system where a single piece of fabric could function as a legal document, a declaration of identity, and a sacred covenant all at once. This wasn't just a clever trick, it was a profound understanding of how to make order visible, accessible, and integrated into the daily rhythm of life for every single person, from the highest official to the most common laborer. We've traced the threads of this system from the high-altitude workshops where master weavers acted as legal scribes, to the diplomatic missions that used textiles as tools of soft power, and into the very spiritual beliefs that gave these laws their weight. We've seen how their legacy was so powerful that it was adopted and refined by the Inca, proving its effectiveness on an even grander scale. The story of the Wari challenges our most basic assumptions about how civilization advances, reminding us that complexity and sophistication can flourish along paths very different from our own. As you reflect on this incredible story, take a moment to look around at your own world. Notice the visual symbols that silently govern your life, the red octagon that means stop, the golden arches that promise a familiar meal, the heart emoji that conveys love across a language barrier, or the flag that stirs a sense of shared identity. These are the descendants of the Wari system, proof that the power of visual language is as vital today as it was in the Andes over a millennium ago. Their story is an invitation to think more creatively about communication, governance, and how we build understanding between people. It asks us to consider how we might weave more clarity, beauty, and inclusivity into the frameworks of our own societies. If this exploration into one of history's most captivating mysteries has sparked your curiosity, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What parallels do you see in our modern world? Share this video with someone who loves a good historical puzzle, and subscribe to join us as we continue to unravel the incredible stories of our past. Thank you for spending this time exploring the woven wonders of the Wari. Remember, the most profound systems of order and meaning are not always found in libraries or law books. Sometimes they are waiting to be discovered in the fabric of everyday life.